What if the cameras captured a very different Meghan Markle than the one Netflix wanted the world to see? What if the polished smile, the soft lighting, the carefully curated, authentic cooking show energy were nothing more than a thin layer of icing over a kitchen simmering with tension, ego clashes, and emotional outbursts that sent even the most respected chef in the world packing her knives? Because according to one Netflix cameraman, that's exactly what happened. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this. You walk onto a multi-million-dollar set expecting calm professionalism, yet minutes later you're dodging flying utensils, whispered frustrations, walkie-talkies buzzing with code red messages, and producers scrambling like line cooks in a five-star restaurant during dinner rush. Now imagine being the cameraman who watched it all unfold, silently filming as Meghan Markle, the show's star, melted down on camera, again and again, until her own head chef, Claire Smith, quietly decided she'd had enough. So let me ask you directly, what would push a Michelin star chef, someone known for near-superhuman patience, someone who has cooked for royalty, presidents, and some of the most demanding figures in the world, to walk off the set of a cooking show meant to be warm, gentle, and inspiring? The answer might shock you. Or maybe it won't shock you at all. Because if there's one thing people have learned over the last few years, it's this. Even the brightest, most glamorous images can fracture under the weight of pressure and expectation. Even the most carefully crafted public personas can crack when the camera isn't filming. Or worse, when the camera is filming, but the footage isn't meant for public eyes. According to the cameraman at the center of this leak, everything about with love, Meghan was supposed to feel wholesome, cozy, intimate. Viewers were meant to feel like they were stepping into Meghan's private kitchen, sharing recipes, stories, and mindfulness tips. A safe space, a soft space, a heartwarming reinvention, a brand reset. Instead, behind the scenes, something entirely different was bubbling under the surface. And that's why this story matters right now. Because Netflix has poured millions into Meghan's brand-building ventures. Because this cooking show was supposed to be a redemption, a reintroduction, a return to form. Because when you bring in a world-renowned chef like Claire Smith, the culinary mind behind some of the most praised restaurants on the planet, you're making a statement. We're serious about this. This isn't fluff. Yet, even the strongest show, the most ambitious production, and the most expensive talent can crumble when the environment becomes toxic. The cameraman says it started with little things. A sharp comment here, a small outburst there, demands that changed minute by minute, a kind of silent tension that you don't notice right away, but you feel. Like when a storm is coming, and the air pressure shifts, and nothing seems wrong yet, but something instinctively tells you to brace yourself. But then it escalated. Quickly, messily, publicly. And according to him, there were three moments, three behind-the-scenes incidents, that defined everything that came after. A kitchen confrontation caught on a handheld camera that was never supposed to be recording. A secret hot mic moment Meghan didn't realize was being taped. And finally, the moment Claire Smith quietly set down her chef's towel, nodded to the nearest assistant, and walked out without a word, leaving a stunned crew, a furious Meghan, and several Netflix executives frantically dialing each other at the same time. All three of those moments allegedly exist. All three are part of the cameraman's account. And all three paint a picture far more chaotic than anyone expected. But the most important part is this. He didn't speak out right away. He waited. He watched the show's PR machine spin its narrative. He watched the teaser trailers, the glowing interviews, the polished promotional reels. He watched people praise the serene environment of the show. And the longer he stayed quiet, the heavier the truth weighed on him. Because sometimes silence feels like complicity. And so he started talking. At first, only to friends, then to a few trusted colleagues, and finally, recently, to someone who understood how to protect his identity while sharing what actually happened. That's why this story is emerging now. That's why his account is circulating. That's why production insiders are suddenly whispering again. Because every time someone tries to bury the truth, someone else feels compelled to dig it back up. And here's where things get even more interesting. This cameraman wasn't new. He'd worked with Meghan before, though not on a full series. He knew her public image. He knew her expectations. He knew the kind of control she demanded over her narrative. Yet he says nothing prepared him for the way she behaved once the cameras stopped rolling, or the way she reacted when she believed footage might show her in a less flattering light. He claims she scrutinized every shot obsessively. She demanded retakes if even a single hair was out of place. She argued with the culinary team about techniques she'd never practiced. She insisted that kitchen assistants stand in certain positions only to get angry when they accidentally blocked lighting. She corrected Claire Smith repeatedly in front of staff, despite Claire being not just a professional chef, but one of the greatest chefs of her generation. And through it all, the crew kept filming. Because at the end of the day, that's their job. But here's the thing. When you spend hours on set, standing behind a camera, watching people closely, you start to see everything the audience never will. The gestures, the tension, the glances exchanged when the star storms off. The way someone holds their breath when the director says, "Let's take that again." The cameraman says the atmosphere felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong step, one unexpected sound, one poorly timed camera angle, and Meghan would snap. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. And yet, the most surprising part of all this wasn't Meghan's behavior. It was Claire Smith's silence. Claire is known for discipline, for grace under pressure, for remaining calm even when the kitchen is on fire, sometimes literally. She's trained teams. She's mentored young chefs. She's worked with people whose egos were significantly larger than their skill, and she handled them all with poise. But the cameraman says something melted inside her on that set. Something tired. Something heavy. Because it's one thing to deal with difficult people. It's another to deal with difficult people who believe their image is more important than the work, the team, or the truth. That's why her quiet exit hit so hard. That's why her decision to leave has become a whisper spreading across culinary and entertainment circles. And that's why, according to insiders, Netflix spiraled the moment she left. They needed her. They depended on her. She was the anchor, not Meghan. So when she walked off, the show lost its spine. And the cameraman says Meghan knew it. Maybe that's why she reacted the way she did afterward. Maybe that's why she doubled down on trying to control the narrative. Maybe that's why staff saw her pacing, snapping orders, clutching her phone, whispering urgently to her advisors. But all of that comes later in the story. And trust me, you'll want to hear every second of it. Right now, the real question we need to focus on is simple. What exactly sparked the downfall? Because every explosion starts with a single match, a single spark, a single moment. And according to the cameraman, that moment happened early, much earlier than anyone realized. It happened the first time Meghan and Claire shared a kitchen. It happened the first time the cameras began rolling. It happened the first time Meghan felt her authority slipping in the presence of someone whose talent outshined her own. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And everything that came after, every tantrum, every argument, every meltdown, traces back to that first moment of friction. But what was that moment? What exactly triggered Meghan's first outburst? And why did the entire crew freeze when it happened? That's where our story truly begins. And what comes next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the very first moment Meghan and Claire stood together in the same kitchen was already charged with something electric? Not the warm, collaborative energy Netflix hoped for, but a quiet tension no one wanted to name out loud. What if the downfall didn't begin with a scream, or an argument, or a slammed utensil, but with a single glance that told the cameraman, the assistants, and even the lighting crew, this isn't going to go the way Netflix planned? Because according to the cameraman, that's exactly what happened. And once you see that moment clearly, you'll understand how everything that followed spiraled into chaos. Let's rewind to day one. New kitchen, new set, freshly polished cookware arranged like jewelry on the counters. Scent of citrus polish, hot lights warming the tiles, producers whispering into headsets. A multi-million-dollar production humming like a well-oiled machine. This was supposed to be Meghan's big rebrand moment. Soft, friendly, elegant, a show that felt like an invitation into her private world. A place where viewers could imagine themselves cooking with her, laughing with her, learning from her. A fresh start, a new chapter. But the cameraman noticed something the moment she walked in. Meghan didn't look excited. She looked determined, almost too determined, as if she wasn't hosting a cooking show, but defending a throne. Have you ever seen someone walk into a room and immediately shift the temperature of the air? Meghan had that effect. Shoulders back, chin lifted, smile practiced. You could feel both confidence and tension wrapped around her like a stitched-together costume she refused to take off. Everyone paused. Assistants straightened. Producers adjusted their earpieces. The director whispered, "Okay, people. Showtime." And for a second, just a second, the set felt like the beginning of something big. Then Claire Smith entered the room. If Meghan arrived like a headline, Claire arrived like a deep breath. Calm, grounded, effortless. She walked onto the set the way only someone who has survived elite kitchens, impossible expectations, and decades of pressure can walk, with quiet authority. She didn't need to announce anything. She didn't need to project confidence. She simply existed in it. And that changed everything. Because the cameraman said, the energy shifted instantly. Meghan's posture stiffened. Her smile tightened. Even the director whispered, "Oh boy, okay. Now, ask yourself this. What happens when a star who's used to controlling her environment is suddenly sharing her spotlight with someone whose talent speaks louder than any PR campaign ever could?" Contradictions start to appear. Subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. The first contradiction? The way Meghan talked about the show. During pre-production, she called it a passion project, a gentle celebration of food, a chance to share love and connection. But the cameraman says that behind the scenes, she treated every detail like a battlefield, from the color of the utensils to the placement of the herbs on the counter. If rosemary leaned an inch too far to the left, she'd stop everything. If a dish towel wasn't folded in the exact aesthetic she wanted, she'd call for a reset. She didn't want authenticity. She wanted control. And then Claire walked in, someone who didn't bend easily. At first, they smiled at each other. Soft pleasantries, surface-level warmth. But the cameraman says you could feel a quiet power struggle forming like a ripple under still water. Meghan wanted the camera to follow her. But the camera naturally drifted toward Claire. Why? Because professionals with exceptional talent naturally draw focus. And that's when the illusion of the show started to crack. Let's break down the first scene they attempted to shoot. It was supposed to be simple. A cheerful intro. Meghan and Claire side by side. Light banter. A warm welcome to viewers. Harmless. Easy. A scene that, on paper, should have taken 15 minutes. It took over an hour. Why? Because Meghan kept stopping. The cameraman remembers her first interruption vividly. They were mid-shot, Meghan smiling at Claire as she introduced her to the audience. Then suddenly, without warning, Meghan cut herself off, frowned, and said, "Sorry, can we try that again? I feel like the angle is off. It's making me look wide." The room froze. Claire blinked. The director blinked. The cameraman held his breath. This wasn't a lighting problem. This wasn't an angle problem. This was a control problem. Producers huddled. Lights were shifted. Cameras were reset. Meghan reviewed the monitor as if she were directing, starring, and producing all at once. Meanwhile, Claire stood quietly, unfazed. But the cameraman noticed something. Meghan kept glancing at her. And not in a friendly, "we've got this" way. More in a "don't outshine me" way. And if you've ever worked with performers, you know that's the kind of glance that reveals everything. Here's where it gets interesting. Every time Claire naturally took the lead, explaining a technique, suggesting a step, adjusting an ingredient, Meghan subtly interrupted. She redirected. She reframed. She made sure the moment came back to her. At first it looked like simple hosting. But the longer it went on, the more it felt like competition. And the cameraman wasn't the only one who sensed it. Assistants exchanged looks. Producers tapped their pens. Someone whispered, "She really doesn't like sharing space." Then came the second contradiction. Meghan claimed the show was about collaboration. But she treated Claire like a supporting character, even though Claire was the culinary backbone holding the concept together. It was only day one and the clash of visions was already showing. But here's where the story gets even more revealing. At one point during the shoot, Claire suggested they try a different technique for a dish to make it more visually appealing for camera. She offered the idea gently, respectfully, as a chef who knows how food behaves under hot lights. But Meghan didn't like it. She didn't just reject the suggestion. She rejected the tone, the idea, the perceived threat. The cameraman remembers her smiling, but the smile didn't reach her eyes, and saying, "I think my way is fine." Let's stick to the plan. Her voice sweet, her eyes sharp. Claire paused. A small moment. A tiny hesitation. Not anger. Not offense. Just a flicker of realization. This wasn't a collaboration. This was a stage. And she wasn't the star. That was the moment, the cameraman says, when the energy truly shifted. The build-up continued quietly but intensely. Meghan began correcting Claire on camera. Correcting Claire, a Michelin star chef, as if Claire were an intern. She did it politely, but pointedly. Every correction chipped something away from the atmosphere. Every correction tightened Meghan's grip on control. Every correction made the crew more silent, more careful, more nervous. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever watched something subtle slowly become impossible to ignore? That's what happened on set. Kindness became tension. Collaboration became competition. Professionalism became power play. And still, no one expected the explosion that would come later. Because on that first day, there was no screaming, no meltdown, no tantrum, just silence simmering under smiles. But the cameraman noticed something else. Meghan kept glancing at the roaming handheld camera. Not the main one. Not the A-cam. The small one. The one filming behind-the-scenes material. The one she couldn't always see. Almost like she was afraid it might catch something she couldn't control. This, he said, was the first sign. Because when someone obsessed with their image starts worrying about the wrong camera, something deeper is brewing. Something emotional. Something unstable. And right there, in that kitchen, between two women who should have created magic together, something invisible cracked. That crack would grow, widen, split open, and ultimately take down the entire show. But it all started here. In this tiny moment, when a smile hid frustration, when a suggestion became an insult, and when Meghan realized she wasn't the most experienced person in the room. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the calmest person in the room is also the one who sees the truth first? What if the quietest presence, the one who doesn't demand attention, doesn't fight for the spotlight, doesn't try to control the narrative, is the one who instantly senses when something is fundamentally wrong? Because according to the Netflix cameraman, that's exactly what happened the moment Claire Smith walked onto the set. And here's the part that might surprise you. Claire didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't correct anyone. She didn't even assert herself as the world-class chef she is. She simply walked in, and the set shifted around her like a room acknowledging its real authority. But let's slow down. Let's picture the scene properly. The kitchen set was bright, almost too bright, with overhead lights blazing to make the food glisten on camera. Copper pans hung neatly on racks. Glossy marble counters sparkled under the glow. Fresh herbs were arranged in small pots, strategically placed for aesthetic effect. Everything was planned. Everything was staged. Everything was meant to feel warm, inviting, curated for a global audience. And into this carefully controlled environment stepped Claire Smith. No entourage, no fanfare, no need to perform. She simply walked in holding a folder of recipes and notes, the same way she would walk into any professional kitchen. You know how some people look like they belong everywhere they go? Claire looked like she belonged in the kitchen more than anyone else in that room. But Meghan? Meghan looked like someone who suddenly felt crowded. The cameraman said the moment was almost imperceptible, a micro-expression, a flash of tension. Meghan's shoulders rose. Her smile stiffened. Her voice went half a pitch higher as she greeted Claire with big, exaggerated energy. Not real warmth. Performed warmth. Claire. So happy you're here. Claire smiled, genuinely, and set her notes down. Excited to get started. But the crew? They all felt the temperature change. Have you ever been in a room where two people greet each other politely, but you can feel something under it? An unspoken clash of energy? That's what this was. Because Meghan didn't just want Claire there. She needed Claire there, but only under her terms. See, in Meghan's vision of the show, Claire was supposed to be a supporting mentor. Emphasis on supporting. Meghan would host the show. Meghan would taste the dishes. Meghan would tell the stories. Meghan would guide the audience. Claire would provide the professional gloss, the culinary credibility, but in a quiet, background kind of way. But the problem with bringing someone like Claire Smith onto a set is that she doesn't blend into the background. She doesn't vanish behind the star. Even when she's standing still, she brings a kind of gravity that pulls the room toward her. And that's exactly what happened. While Meghan previewed the day's shoot to the producers, the cameraman noticed something remarkable. Crew members drifted toward Claire. Not deliberately, not consciously, just naturally. People asked her about the recipes, about the equipment, about ingredient prep. Because in a kitchen, instincts take over, and the instinct is to trust the chef who's actually a chef. And that, right away, created the first invisible fault line. Because the more the crew gravitated toward Claire, the more Meghan pulled the spotlight back toward herself. The cameraman remembers the first example vividly. They were preparing to film an opening segment. Meghan stood center stage. Claire was meant to stand beside her, but slightly turned toward the stove, positioned as the culinary guide. Assistants adjusted bowls, adjusted herbs, tidied edges of aprons. Cameras framed the shot. Then the director said it. "Claire, can you move just a tiny bit closer?" Meghan tends to lean forward, so this will balance the frame. And Meghan? She took one step closer to the center, subtly reclaiming the position. Claire adjusted with a calm nod. Not bothered, not reading into it, just doing her job. But the cameraman saw Meghan's eyes flick sideways, as if checking whether Claire's presence was too strong, too noticeable, too centered. That was the first spark of insecurity. But here's the twist. Claire didn't compete. She didn't mirror Meghan's energy. She didn't push back. She remained poised, grounded, patient. And that patience only made Meghan more unsettled. Because power struggles feel different when only one person is fighting. And all of this was just the beginning. Let's talk about the recipes, because this is where things became truly uncomfortable. Meghan had come in with ideas, dishes she wanted to feature, stories she wanted to connect to certain ingredients, scenes she wanted to shape based on aesthetics, not technique. She saw cooking as a narrative tool. Claire saw cooking as cooking. So when Claire reviewed Meghan's recipe notes, the cameraman said her face went completely blank, politely blank. The way professionals react when they don't want to visibly criticize something. One dish was overly complicated. One dish didn't make sense for on-camera timing. One dish used an entire cup of wine, but had no cooking step to burn it off. One dish required equipment that wasn't even on set. Claire calmly pointed out the logistical issues, offering simple solutions. "We can swap this. We can simplify that. This won't hold under lights. This step needs adjusting." Meghan didn't like that. Correcting a recipe wasn't correcting the dish. It was correcting her. At least, that's how she interpreted it. And according to the cameraman, something darkened in Meghan's expression. A subtle tightening around her mouth. A blink that lasted half a second too long. A breath held a moment too sharply. Have you ever seen someone pretend to take feedback while their entire body screams they hate every second of it? That was Meghan. But Claire, still unaware of how fragile the dynamic was, kept offering gentle professional guidance. The kind of guidance any show would be lucky to have. And every time Claire spoke with quiet expertise, every time she answered a question with confidence, every time she explained a technique clearly enough for the entire crew to understand, Meghan stiffened. The cameraman said it was like watching two different movies playing at once. In one movie, Meghan was the star hosting her big comeback. In the other, Claire Smith, with her natural authority, unintentionally stole the spotlight simply by being herself. Contradictions grew sharper. Meghan wanted a wholesome energy, but she was visibly irritated whenever attention drifted. She wanted authenticity, but she micromanaged every detail until nothing felt real. She wanted collaboration, but she resisted every suggestion that wasn't hers. And Claire? She remained calm, which, ironically, made everything worse. Because a calm person in a chaotic environment exposes the chaos more clearly. And the cameraman swears the first real turning point happened barely an hour into filming, during a simple prep demonstration involving chopping herbs. Claire approached Meghan to show her a safe finger placement technique, something gentle, something every home cook could learn from. A small moment that would have made great TV. But Meghan froze. Her smile twitched. She glanced at the camera. And then she said, with an airy, almost dismissive laugh, "Oh, I actually do it my own way." The room went silent. Even the knives seemed to stop moving. Claire stepped back. "Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." Her tone was respectful, her posture open, her expression neutral. But the cameraman saw it, the tiny flicker of realization in Claire's eyes. The instant she understood what she was dealing with. Not a collaborator, not a partner, not even a student, but a host who saw correction as challenge, guidance as criticism, expertise as threat. And from that moment on, the day stopped being about cooking and started being about power. Because Meghan wasn't just hosting a show. She was defending her image, her authority, her narrative. And Claire's quiet competence was the first real crack in that illusion. The cameraman says that crack grew bigger every minute, until finally, something happened that no one expected. But what came next wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't even verbal. It was a look, a moment. A shift so subtle, yet so powerful that everyone in the room felt it at the same time. And that moment, that tiny spark of tension, was about to ignite the first true tantrum on set. What if the first true meltdown didn't come from something massive or dramatic, but from something so small that it should have been forgettable, yet instead became the moment the entire crew realized, oh, this is going to be a problem? What if the first spark wasn't an insult, or a confrontation, or a power move, but a single burnt sauce? Because according to the cameraman in this narrative, that's exactly how the first tantrum started, quietly, unexpectedly, and then all at once. Picture the scene. Cameras rolling, lights blazing, assistants stationed in the corners like chess pieces. Claire calmly prepping ingredients while explaining the recipe. Meghan standing center stage, smiling at the main camera with perfected ease. Steam rising from the pans. The air thick with the scent of simmering tomatoes, basil, olive oil. The vibe? Controlled, calm, predictable, until suddenly, something went wrong. A pot was left unattended for 3 seconds too long. Just 3 seconds. But under hot studio lights, 3 seconds is enough to turn a silky red sauce into something slightly scorched at the bottom. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing unfixable. Just a minor culinary hiccup. The kind any chef, any cook, any human being could encounter on any given day. But Meghan reacted like it was betrayal. According to the cameraman's recounting within this story, it began with a freeze. She stopped mid-sentence, spoon in hand, inhaled sharply, and looked down at the pot as if it had insulted her directly. Then she looked up, not at Claire, not at the crew, but at the cameras. Because in her mind, this wasn't just a sauce burning. This was her image burning. Her voice tightened. Cut. Not shouted, not screamed, but icy, sharp, a tone that sliced the air. The director blinked. We can keep rolling, Meghan. It's okay, we'll cut around it. No, she said. We need to redo the scene. Meghan placed the spoon down with theatrical precision. Too soft to be anger, too sharp to be calm. And then she did something the cameraman would never forget. She stepped back from the stove, folded her arms, and stared at the pot as if it were the cause of all her problems. Claire stepped in gently, as world-class chefs do, and said, "It's a small scorch. We can pivot. No one at home will notice. Let's just fold it into the recipe. It'll add depth." Meghan's head snapped toward her. Are you saying I ruined it? The crew stiffened. The assistants froze mid-motion. The director's eyebrows shot up. Claire remained calm, hands clasped loosely in front of her. Not at all. Scorch happens. It's normal. We can salvage it. But the cameraman said Meghan didn't hear any of that. Not really. What she heard was, you made a mistake, in front of cameras. And for someone obsessed with controlling her image, that was intolerable. Meghan sighed loudly, dramatically, like the entire universe had conspired against her. She turned away from the stove, pacing a few steps, one hand on her forehead, exhaling loudly. The director whispered into his headset. Assistants exchanged nervous glances. Someone tried not to knock over a bowl of herbs. Then Meghan pivoted back toward the pot, grabbed the handle, and held it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. This is unusable, she declared. Claire calmly reached out. Let me. But Meghan pulled it back, refusing to help. No, it's fine. I'll do it myself. And then she did what the cameraman described as the first real tantrum. Not a scream, not an explosion, but a series of rapid-fire frustrations delivered with the sharpness of someone trying very hard not to look out of control, but failing. She slammed the pot down. She rattled the spoon loudly against the counter. She muttered, "This set is too hot. That's why it burned." Then she muttered again, "The lighting is too strong. That's why it burned." The cameraman said it was fascinating. She blamed everything except herself. Lights, heat, equipment, timing, assistance, the universe. Everything. Claire watched with patience bordering on superhuman. But then Meghan crossed an unspoken line. She turned to the nearest assistant and said, "Why didn't you remind me to stir it earlier?" The room went silent. Stone silent. Kitchen appliance dies mid-shot silent. The assistant's face went pale. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking to camera. I was clearly busy," Meghan snapped. "You could have stepped in." The cameraman said, Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. The first time she showed anything resembling disapproval. Because chefs don't blame assistants for their mistakes. Not real chefs. Not professionals. Not leaders. And Meghan's comment wasn't just unfair, it was humiliating to the assistant. Claire stepped forward gently, voice steady. "Hey, it's not her fault. Burnt sauce happens. Let's just start again. We've all done it." Meghan's jaw tightened. And then she delivered the sentence that changed the energy of the set. "No, Claire. Professionals don't burn sauce." The cameraman said he could practically hear the metaphorical glass shatter. Because that sentence wasn't about the sauce. It was about authority, image, hierarchy, and it was the first time she challenged Claire directly. Claire took a slow breath. It wasn't her. "No," Meghan interrupted, holding up her hand. "I'm just saying. This shouldn't happen on a professionally run set." The irony hung in the air like smoke. Because the only unprofessional behavior happening in that kitchen was coming from the star of the show. The cameraman kept filming, because that's what cameramen do. But inside, he said, he felt the room tilt. Tension thickened. People avoided eye contact. A sound tech slowly lowered his boom mic like he was lowering a flag at a funeral. And then something unexpected happened. Meghan stormed off. Straight up, walked away from the stove, across the set, past the monitors, and into the hallway, leaving everyone standing in stunned silence. Not a word, not a cue, not a signal, just gone. The director exhaled slowly. "Okay, pause everyone." Assistants whispered. "What do we do? Should we reset? Should we check on her? Do we keep Claire here?" But Claire stood still, composed, professional, like she'd seen 100 meltdowns in Michelin-level kitchens before. Though none this performative. And then she quietly said, "Let's give her a minute." The cameraman followed Meghan's path with his lens for a few seconds, but the director motioned for him to cut. Still, he'd seen enough. Meghan pacing in the hallway, talking to her team, animated hand gestures, agitated steps, and a phrase repeated twice. "I can't look incompetent on camera. I can't." That was the real source of the tantrum, not the sauce, not the heat, not the lighting. It was image. Always image. While they waited for Meghan to return, Claire walked to the stove, inspected the pot, and scraped the bottom with a wooden spoon. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, but the cameraman heard it, "It's barely burnt." And that made everything even sadder. 15 minutes later, Meghan returned. Her smile had returned too, but it didn't look real anymore. It looked like a mask. "Let's reset," she said brightly, as if nothing happened. But everything had changed. Because the cameraman, the chef, the assistants, the crew, they had all seen behind the curtain. And once you see someone's real reaction under pressure, you can't unsee it. This was the first tantrum. Small on the surface, massive underneath. A warning shot. A preview of what was coming. A glimpse into the storm beneath the smile. But if the first meltdown was quiet, controlled, simmering, the next one, the one coming soon, it wouldn't be quiet at all. Because the next explosion, according to the cameraman, was louder, public, and fully captured on camera. And it would change everything. What happens when two worlds collide? One built on discipline, mastery, and earned expertise, and the other built on image, control, and the belief that the room revolves around you. What happens when a professional chef who has trained some of the world's most elite cooks finds herself trapped in the same kitchen as a host who cannot tolerate being corrected, redirected, or overshadowed for even a moment? According to the cameraman's account in this narrative, what happens is simple. Tension stops simmering and finally starts to boil. The fascinating thing about the second tantrum, the louder, public, fully captured one, isn't that it happened. It's why it happened. Because it didn't begin with shouting. It didn't begin with accusations. It didn't begin with an explosion. It began with Meghan wanting control, and Claire simply refusing to give her the illusion of it. Let's jump straight into the moment everything shifted. The crew had reset the kitchen after the first tantrum. New pot, new ingredients, fresh herbs, rebrushed countertops, assistants moving with extra caution. The director speaking in soft, measured tones. Everyone walking on eggshells because they weren't sure which version of Meghan Markle would be returning to the set, the polished host or the one who lashed out at an assistant over a barely burnt sauce. She walked in smiling, too brightly. The kind of smile that says, "I've decided we're pretending that didn't happen." And the crew nodded along silently, fully aware that pretending was their safest option. Claire stood at the counter prepping ingredients. Her energy was calm, grounded, almost serene. But the cameraman noticed something new. Claire's attention was sharper, more observant. She wasn't rattled, but she wasn't blind either. She had shifted from kind mentor to careful professional, the way a seasoned chef adjusts posture when they sense instability in the kitchen. That shift would matter. The first few takes went smoothly. Meghan followed the script. Claire chimed in politely. Cameras rolled. The mood was lighter. Until it wasn't. Because as they began filming a segment about knife skills, a simple introductory demonstration meant to show basic chopping techniques, Meghan decided to take the lead. And this is where the trouble began. She picked up the knife the wrong way, held the vegetable incorrectly, had her fingers positioned dangerously close to the blade. Claire noticed immediately. Every chef notices. It's instinct. Like a dancer noticing bad posture. Like a pilot sensing turbulence before it hits. Claire gently stepped in. Let me just show the safe way to hold your fingers, so viewers don't. Meghan pulled back instantly. No, I've got it. The cameraman felt the entire room tense. Claire didn't push. She simply nodded and stepped back, letting Meghan continue. But the problem wasn't the technique. It was Meghan's ego. And when she made a second mistake, this time slicing the vegetable unevenly, Claire automatically reached over to demonstrate the correct motion. But Meghan snapped. In front of the crew, in front of the cameras, in front of the director. Claire, please don't correct me on camera. Silence fell like a hammer. The cameraman swears even the overhead lights hummed quieter. Claire blinked once, twice, calm, collected, not offended, but surprised. I wasn't correcting you, she said gently, just showing another method. Meghan's smile tightened. Well, I don't want it to look like I need help. The contradiction was glaring. The entire point of the show was learning, sharing, growing. Help was the entire premise. But ego doesn't listen to logic. The director cleared his throat. Maybe we can. And that's when Meghan turned on him too. No, let's just keep rolling. This was the Meghan the cameraman described as dangerous for filming. The version who refused notes, refused feedback, refused any moment where she wasn't the absolute center of control. Claire stepped back again, giving Meghan space. But that only made things worse. Because the more space Claire gave her, the more insecure Meghan became. And insecurity, when mixed with cameras, lights, and pressure, becomes volatility. The scene continued with Meghan chopping in a way that made the entire kitchen nervous. A slice slipped. The knife hit the board at an odd angle. Assistants winced. A lighting tech whispered, "She's going to cut herself." Claire couldn't help herself. Her instincts kicked in again. Meghan, careful, your fingers are. I said I've got it. The words blasted through the studio. The knife hit the cutting board so loudly that the boom mic captured the crack like a gunshot. The cameraman flinched. Assistants jumped. The director froze mid-breath. And Claire? She went completely still. Not angry, not emotional, just still. The way a seasoned chef goes still when someone in the kitchen loses control. Meghan immediately realized she'd snapped. You could see it in the way her face shifted, from anger to awareness to embarrassment in a matter of seconds. She glanced around the room, realizing every pair of eyes was on her. Every camera pointed at her. She forced a laugh. A brittle, paper-thin laugh. Oh gosh, I'm just passionate today, she said. Nobody laughed back. Not the director. Not the assistants. Not the cameraman. Not Claire. And that silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, was the moment the cameraman says Meghan finally felt the weight of what she'd done. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. It's just frustrating when I'm trying to show something and people jump in. Claire's tone was soft. I understand. I just want you to be safe. Meghan didn't respond. She picked up the knife again. The blade trembled slightly in her hand. Not because she was afraid, but because she was furious. Furious at the situation. furious at the attention on Claire, furious that she didn't look like the natural chef she imagined herself to be. And then came the moment that broke the room. The director gently said, "Let's reset and take it from the top." But Meghan shook her head and muttered under her breath, loud enough for the nearest crew members and the boom mic to hear, "It would be easier if Claire didn't keep trying to take over." Claire's head snapped up, not dramatically, not angrily, just sharply, a single movement that said, did she really just say that? She hadn't taken over anything. She'd tried to prevent an injury. She'd tried to teach. She tried to help. The crew knew it. The cameraman knew it. And Meghan knew it too. Which is why she said it under her breath instead of to Claire's face. Except the mic caught it. And everyone knew it. From that moment forward, tension became a presence in the room. A character in the story. A living, breathing force hovering over the set. But the worst part wasn't the snapping, or the knife slam, or the muttered accusation. The worst part was what happened next. Because Meghan's insecurity hardened into defensiveness. Her defensiveness hardened into resentment. And her resentment turned toward a new target. The cameraman. Why? Because he had filmed everything. And in Meghan's world, footage is power. What she did next, what she accused him of next, is what finally pushed the entire set from tension into chaos. Because she didn't just snap at him. She went after him directly, aggressively, publicly. And the cameraman says this was the moment he realized the job wasn't just stressful, it might actually become dangerous. But what she said to him, what she accused him of, and how she cornered him in front of the entire crew, was something no one on set ever forgot. And that moment wasn't private. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't backstage. It happened right in the middle of the kitchen, and every camera caught it. What Meghan did next would ignite the beginning of the end. Because the next meltdown wasn't just tension. It was a direct attack, and it shattered what little calm remained. What if the most revealing moment on a set isn't the one filmed deliberately, but the one captured accidentally? The moment someone forgets their mic is still on, their guard slips, and their real feelings leak out into the open. What if the truth about what was happening behind the scenes didn't come from dramatic confrontations or screaming matches, but from a quiet rant whispered into a microphone that transmitted straight into the headsets of half the crew? Because according to the cameraman at the center of this narrative, that is precisely what happened next. And this moment, the hot mic moment, didn't just expose tension. It exposed everything. It happened less than an hour after Meghan lashed out during the knife segment. The air was still thick with discomfort. The director kept his tone artificially cheerful. Assistants tiptoed around like they were trapped in a museum full of priceless explosives. And Claire Smith, calm, composed Claire, stood at the counter resetting ingredients with the patience of a saint. But Meghan? She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The cameraman said she looked like someone holding back a dam's worth of frustration, and every second risked a crack. Her smile was too tight. Her movements too sharp. She laughed at things nobody found funny. She corrected things that didn't need correcting. That's how people act when they feel threatened. And whether she admitted it or not, Claire's quiet competence had threatened her. Now here's where everything tilts. The director called for a short break so the crew could reset lighting angles. Meghan stepped off to the side with her personal assistant, a young woman who looked both dedicated and exhausted at the same time. Meghan paced, making broad gestures, running her hand through her hair in that, I'm under pressure but pretending not to be way. She lowered her voice like she didn't want anyone to hear. Except she forgot one thing. Her mic was still on. It was transmitting. Live. Clear as day. Straight into the headsets of the sound team. The director. The producers. And yes, the cameraman. According to him, this is what she said. I swear, Claire is doing this on purpose. The assistant murmured something inaudible. No, seriously, Meghan snapped softly. She keeps correcting me. She keeps acting like she's the expert. The irony hit the cameraman so hard he nearly laughed into his mic. Claire is the expert. That's literally why she was there. But Meghan wasn't done. She's trying to make me look stupid on camera. The assistant tried again to calm her. Something about Claire just trying to help. But Meghan cut her off. No. She keeps stepping in. She keeps giving instructions. And everyone listens to her. It's messing with the flow of the show. It's like she wants to be the star. The cameraman felt the entire sound booth stiffen. Because this wasn't insecurity anymore. This was projection. But Meghan was just warming up. I'm the one with the platform. I'm the one people want to see. This is my show. Why does she have to insert herself every 5 seconds? Her assistant whispered, "She's the chef, Meghan." And the cameraman swears the silence that followed that statement was the heaviest silence he'd ever heard. But then, the shift. Meghan's voice went cold. She needs to understand boundaries. Boundaries. That word hung in the air like a blade. Because if anyone had crossed boundaries that day, it wasn't Claire Smith. Meghan lowered her voice even more, but still not enough to escape the mic. I don't want any shots where it looks like she's leading. I don't want it to seem like she's teaching me. This is supposed to be my space. My narrative. My brand. The cameraman felt something twist in his stomach. This wasn't a cooking show anymore. This wasn't collaboration. This wasn't mentorship. This was a turf war. A quiet, ego-driven turf war that Meghan believed she was losing, even though no one else saw it that way. Then it happened. The sentence that would later circulate among the crew. The sentence that made Claire's head snap up even though Meghan was across the room. The sentence that exposed everything. Claire needs to remember whose show this is. The cameraman said he watched Claire in that moment. She was wiping down a cutting board, methodical and calm. But when Meghan said those words, Claire paused. Just slightly. Just long enough to reveal she'd heard something she wasn't meant to hear. How? Because sound travels in kitchens. Whispers bounce. Tension echoes. And Meghan wasn't whispering nearly as quietly as she thought. The assistant tried again. Maybe she's just trying to help. She's overstepping, Meghan snapped. And I'm not going to let her ruin this for me. Those words. Not going to let her ruin this. Were captured perfectly by the mic, crystal clear. Sharp. Unfiltered. And the worst part? The moment Meghan said them, she looked directly at the cameraman. Directly. As if she somehow knew, instinctively, that something was slipping out of her control. The cameraman lowered his lens slightly, trying to appear neutral, but inside he was buzzing. Because he wasn't just filming a show. He was witnessing a story come undone in real time. 5 seconds later, a sound tech sprinted over to Meghan, whispering frantically, "Your mic is still on." Her reaction? She froze. Literally froze. Eyes widened, shoulders tightened, lips parted just slightly. And then, the panic. She ripped the mic pack off so fast the cord snapped against her shirt. She shoved it into the sound tech's hands like it was the source of her humiliation. "Why didn't anyone mute it?" she hissed. The tech stammered. "It wasn't. I didn't, we thought." Meghan cut him off. "Just fix it. Now." She stormed off to the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. The crew didn't move. The cameraman didn't breathe. Claire looked at the floor. Everyone knew what they had just heard. And here's the twist. Not one of them blamed Claire. Not one. Because the hot mic moment didn't reveal a chef trying to overstep. It revealed a host unraveling. A host who didn't want guidance. Didn't want collaboration. Didn't want to be corrected. Didn't want to appear anything less than perfect. And to someone obsessed with controlling their image, a mic revealing their true thoughts is the worst betrayal imaginable. When Meghan finally returned to set, she tried to pretend nothing happened. She forced brightness into her voice, forced calm into her posture, forced cheer into her smile. But something in her eyes had changed. A cornered look, a defensive flicker, the look of someone who realized that for the first time. The crew had seen behind her mask, and the cameraman noticed something even more important. Meghan stopped looking at Claire entirely. Not once. Not for the rest of the day. But if the hot mic moment cracked the surface, what happened next shattered it completely. Because the next meltdown wouldn't be subtle. It wouldn't be whispered. It wouldn't be hidden in sound feeds or misdirected frustration. It would be an explosion so public, so loud, and so unavoidable that even Netflix executives couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. And it would begin with a single dish, that Claire gently critiqued. A critique Meghan took as a personal insult. And that was the moment everything erupted. Because the kitchen explosion wasn't a metaphor. It was real, loud, chaotic, and it was fully caught on camera. What Meghan did next would change the entire trajectory of the show. What if the biggest explosion on set didn't come from a broken appliance, a dropped pan, or a genuine cooking mishap, but from ego combusting under pressure? What if the moment that finally triggered the full-scale meltdown wasn't dramatic at first, but subtle, almost gentle, like a match being struck quietly before igniting an entire room? Because according to the cameraman in this narrative, the kitchen explosion didn't begin loudly. It began with a single critique. A calm, respectful, unquestionably professional critique from Claire Smith, the kind of culinary guidance she had given thousands of times in her 20-year career. But to Meghan, it wasn't guidance. It wasn't partnership. It wasn't expertise. It was threat. It was challenge. It was humiliation waiting to happen on camera. And that's exactly why everything blew up. Let's set the scene. It was midday. The crew had gathered for one of the bigger sequences of the episode. A hero dish, meant to be a signature moment. The director wanted a beautifully smooth, 2-minute segment. Meghan preparing the base, Claire adding commentary, both women tasting the final product together. Simple, polished, visual. But the tension from the hot mic leak was still hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. Claire was chopping quietly at the counter, prepping garnishes with perfect precision. Assistants hovered nearby, waiting for cues. The cameraman stood behind the A-cam, headphones on, lens adjusted, capturing every micro-expression. And Meghan, well, Meghan had chosen her persona for this moment. Bright, charming, effortlessly confident. Except none of it looked natural. Her smile was too tight. Her gestures too controlled. The cameraman said that if you watched her closely, you could see her scanning the room constantly, making sure everyone was looking at her, not Claire. It was a fragile performance. And fragility, when mixed with pressure, becomes explosive. The dish they were cooking was simple enough, a roasted vegetable medley with a signature sauce. Nothing complicated, nothing risky, perfect for a clean, pleasant take. But when Meghan poured the sauce over the vegetables, Claire noticed something instantly. Something subtle, something only a trained chef would catch. The sauce hadn't reduced enough. It was too thin. It didn't cling to the vegetables the way it should. Claire stepped closer with gentle professionalism. Her tone was soft, neutral, almost motherly. Maybe we should give the sauce another minute. Let it thicken slightly. It'll hold better on camera. A harmless suggestion. A normal suggestion. A helpful suggestion. But to Meghan, it was a dagger. Her smile faltered. Her eyebrows twitched. Her jaw moved the smallest bit. A suppressed reaction the cameraman noticed instantly. Is it wrong? She asked, voice too bright. No, not wrong, Claire said kindly. Just not quite. There's nothing wrong with it, Meghan interrupted. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Sharp. Defensive. Icy. Claire blinked. I just meant. I heard what you meant, Meghan snapped. The director raised his hand slightly. We can redo that part if. No, Meghan said quickly. We're not redoing anything. The sauce is fine. Claire stepped back politely. Okay. But the cameraman could see it. Something breaking inside Meghan. Something tightening behind her eyes. Something boiling beneath the surface. Because the critique wasn't about the sauce. It was about the moment Meghan realized Claire was right. And that everyone else in the kitchen knew Claire was right. And that the camera was rolling. And nothing makes a person obsessed with image spiral faster than the fear of looking imperfect. The cameraman said it happened in 3 seconds flat. Meghan looked at the dish. Then at Claire. Then at the producers behind the monitor. Then at the camera pointed at her face. Her breathing changed. Her posture stiffened. Her voice lowered into something hard and brittle. I said the sauce is fine. Let's move on. Claire, still the picture of professionalism, nodded. Of course. But the cameraman could see Meghan interpreting that nod not as agreement, but as condescension. And that's when the real explosion began. Because in the next take, Meghan made a mistake. A noticeable one. She used the wrong spoon. The camera caught it. A producer quietly said into the mic, "We need to reset." Meghan snapped. I did it right. The words sliced through the kitchen like a blade. Every crew member froze. The director's hand stopped midair. An assistant quietly gasped. Claire's eyes lifted, concern in her expression. Meghan, she said gently. It's okay, we can. Don't tell me it's okay. Her voice shattered into a shout. And then? Everything escalated in seconds. She slammed the spoon down. It clattered violently across the counter, knocking into a stack of bowls. A bowl tipped over. Vegetables spilled. Sauce splashed onto the marble. Something metal clanged to the floor. A second bowl cracked. A timer beeped wildly. A camera assistant stumbled backward. It was chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. The cameraman held his shot, because training tells you never to drop the lens. But inside, he said his heart was pounding. Because he'd filmed meltdowns before, but never one quite like this. Never one fueled by such a deep, simmering cocktail of insecurity and resentment. Meghan wasn't just angry. She was unraveling. "You don't get it," she shouted, at no one and everyone at the same time. "I'm trying to host a show here, and every time I do something, someone jumps in to correct me." The director tried again. "Meghan, no, just stop talking. All of you." A silence hit the set like a shockwave. And then, in the quiet that followed, she made the mistake that changed everything. She pointed at Claire. "It's always her." The crew stopped breathing. Claire froze mid-step. The cameraman steadied his lens, capturing every detail. "Every time I do something, she finds something wrong with it." Meghan continued, voice cracking with fury. "She's undermining me. I can't host a show with someone constantly trying to make me look bad." Claire's voice was soft. Too soft for the violence that just came at her. "I'm not trying to make you look bad," she said. "I'm trying to help make the dish the best it can be. You're trying to take over." "No, I'm really not." "You are." Claire took a slow breath, the kind a professional takes when they've reached a limit but refuse to show it. "I'm here to support you," Claire said. But Meghan didn't want support. She wanted control. And in that moment, cracking under pressure, she screamed. "Then stay in the background." It echoed. Hard. Ugly. Humiliating. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Everyone saw Claire's face change, not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly. Her eyes dimmed. Just slightly. A tiny collapse of light. Not hurt. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. The cameraman said it was like watching a bridge crumble in silence. And then came the final moment, the moment nobody saw coming. Claire stepped forward gently and said, "Meghan, maybe we should take 5. And Meghan exploded. "Stop telling me what to do." The shout was so loud the boom mic distorted. An assistant dropped a cutting board. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The director finally intervened. "Okay, that's enough. Everyone take a break." But Meghan wasn't done. She turned to the cameraman, the one who had been silently capturing everything, and delivered a line that sucked all the oxygen out of the room. "Are you filming this? Stop filming me." She lunged toward him, not violently, but aggressively, invading his space, blocking the lens with her hand. The cameraman stepped back instinctively. "Point that somewhere else," she snapped. "You're making me look crazy." And in that moment, that exact moment, every single person on set knew the truth. She didn't care about the dish. She didn't care about the critique. She didn't care about the meltdown. She cared that the camera saw her fail. And the irony? The only thing making her look out of control was how desperately she tried to hide losing control. The director finally ordered a full stop. Crew members scattered. Assistants fled. Sound techs powered down. Lights dimmed. And Claire Smith stood alone at the counter, quietly wiping sauce off the marble. No anger. No bitterness. Just a solemn resignation. Because something inside her had shifted too. And the cameraman says the worst part wasn't the explosion. It was what came after. Because when Claire finally broke her silence, what she said next would change the entire trajectory of the show. And it would be the first step toward her final decision, the one that shook Netflix itself. What if the calmest person in the room is also the one who sees the truth first? What if the quietest presence, the one who doesn't demand attention, doesn't fight for the spotlight, doesn't try to control the narrative, is the one who instantly senses when something is fundamentally wrong? Because according to the Netflix cameraman, that's exactly what happened the moment Claire Smith walked onto the set. And here's the part that might surprise you. Claire didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't correct anyone. She didn't even assert herself as the world-class chef she is. She simply walked in, and the set shifted around her like a room acknowledging its real authority. But let's slow down. Let's picture the scene properly. The kitchen set was bright, almost too bright, with overhead lights blazing to make the food glisten on camera. Copper pans hung neatly on racks. Glossy marble counters sparkled under the glow. Fresh herbs were arranged in small pots, strategically placed for aesthetic effect. Everything was planned. Everything was staged. Everything was meant to feel warm, inviting, curated for a global audience. And into this carefully controlled environment stepped Claire Smith. No entourage, no fanfare, no need to perform. She simply walked in holding a folder of recipes and notes, the same way she would walk into any professional kitchen. You know how some people look like they belong everywhere they go? Claire looked like she belonged in the kitchen more than anyone else in that room. But Meghan? Meghan looked like someone who suddenly felt crowded. The cameraman said the moment was almost imperceptible, a micro-expression, a flash of tension. Meghan's shoulders rose. Her smile stiffened. Her voice went half a pitch higher as she greeted Claire with big, exaggerated energy. Not real warmth. Performed warmth. Claire. So happy you're here. Claire smiled, genuinely, and set her notes down, excited to get started. But the crew? They all felt the temperature change. Have you ever been in a room where two people greet each other politely, but you can feel something under it? An unspoken clash of energy? That's what this was. Because Meghan didn't just want Claire there. She needed Claire there, but only under her terms. See, in Meghan's vision of the show, Claire was supposed to be a supporting mentor. Emphasis on supporting. Meghan would host the show. Meghan would taste the dishes. Meghan would tell the stories. Meghan would guide the audience. Claire would provide the professional gloss, the culinary